The humid air of the Rio Grande Valley hung heavy over the tarmac as Elias stepped out of the McAllen Miller International Airport. He hadn't been back to Texas in 15 years, and the heat hit him like a physical weight, a thick citrus-scented embrace that smelled of childhood and regret. In his pocket, he clutched a printed listing from a real estate website. The paper wilted from the moisture of his palm. The headline was bold and almost taunting. Modern luxury meets valley charm. See what $355,000 buys you in McAllen. Elias was 34, software architect from Seattle whose life had become a series of gray glass buildings and expensive, lonely dinners. When his mother passed away 2 months ago, she hadn't left him a fortune. But she had left him her share of a family plot and a life insurance policy that totaled exactly $355,000. It was a specific, peculiar amount. His sister, Sophia, who had stayed behind in McAllen to teach elementary school, had sent him the listing. "It's time to come home, Elle," she had texted. "Stop paying $2,000 a month for a closet in the clouds." See what that money actually buys you here. The drive to the North McAllen neighborhood was a blur of palm trees, neon signs for H-E-B grocery stores, and the flat, sprawling horizon that seemed to go on forever. When he pulled his rental car into the driveway of the house on Larkspur Lane, he stopped and stared. In Seattle, $355,000 might buy you a parking space or a very distressed studio apartment in a basement. Here, it bought a palace of white stucco, a red-tiled roof, and a lawn so green it looked painted. "You're staring," a voice called out. Elias looked up to see Sophia standing on the porch of the neighboring house, holding a pitcher of hibiscus tea. She looked older, with fine lines around her eyes that spoke of years spent laughing at students and enduring the Texas sun. But her smile was the same. She walked across the grass, the space between them closing years of distance in a few steps. "It's huge," Elias whispered, gesturing to the house. 4 bedrooms? A 3-car garage? There has to be a catch. Is it haunted? Is the foundation made of sand? Sophia laughed, a bright, melodic sound. "No catch, big brother. That's just the valley. $355,000 buys you space. It buys you a backyard big enough for a trampoline and a quinceañera. It buys you a kitchen where 3 people can cook without bumping elbows. But come on, the realtor's inside. Her name is Martha, and she knew our mom." They stepped through the heavy oak front doors into a foyer with vaulted ceilings. The air conditioning was a frigid, welcome relief. Martha, a woman with hair piled high and a necklace made of turquoise, greeted them with a warmth that felt distinctly Texan. She didn't just show the house, she narrated a potential life. "Now, Elias, look at this kitchen," Martha said, gesturing toward the granite countertops and the stainless steel appliances. "This island is big enough to roll out tortillas for the whole neighborhood. And this breakfast nook? That's where you sit on Sunday mornings when the sun comes through those big windows." As Elias walked through the rooms, the value of the house began to shift in his mind. He saw the master suite with its garden tub and walk-in closet that was larger than his current bedroom. He saw the 4th bedroom, which Martha suggested could be an office. But as he stood in the center of the living room, looking out at the covered patio and the sparkling blue of the small swimming pool, the conflict began to stir. He wasn't just looking at square footage, he was looking at a commitment. To buy this house for $355,000 meant he was choosing a side. He was choosing the heat over the rain, the family he had neglected over the career he had chased, and the memory of his mother over the anonymity of the city. "I can't do it, Soph," he said quietly, after Martha had stepped outside to take a phone call. Sophia paused, her hand trailing over the cool stone of the fireplace. "Why not? You can work from anywhere. You've been complaining about the cost of living for 5 years. Would this move?" "It's too much house," Elias said, his voice tightening. "What am I going to do with 4 bedrooms? I'm one person. I don't have anyone to fill these rooms. In Seattle, my smallness makes sense. Here in this $355,000 mansion, my loneliness will just have more room to echo." Sophia stepped closer, her expression softening. "You think this house is about being alone? Look out that window, Elias. Look at the fence." He looked. The fence was low, made of wrought iron. In the yard next door, Sophia's yard, he could see a plastic slide, a stray soccer ball, and a charcoal grill. "Mom didn't leave you that money so you could buy a trophy," Sophia said. She knew the market. She knew that for this specific price, you could afford to live next door to your only living relatives. $355,000 doesn't just buy you 2,800 square feet of real estate, it buys you Sunday dinners. It buys you being the uncle who shows up for soccer games because he's 5 minutes away, not 5 hours by plane. It buys you a community that actually knows your name. The climax of Elias's internal struggle didn't happen with a shout or a dramatic gesture. It happened in the silence of the backyard. He walked out to the pool and sat on the edge, dipping his hand into the water. The sun was beginning to set, turning the Texas sky into a bruised palette of purple, orange, and gold. He thought about his apartment in Seattle, the way he knew his neighbors only by the sound of their footsteps above him. He thought about the $355,000 he had in the bank, a legacy of his mother's hard work and her final wish for him. He realized then that he had been measuring value all wrong. He had been looking at the price per square foot, the resale potential, and the property taxes. He hadn't been looking at the cost of his own isolation. "Martha," Elias called out, standing up. The realtor appeared at the sliding glass door, her phone tucked away. "Does the price include the patio furniture?" Martha grinned, her eyes twinkling. "For you, Elias, I think we can make that happen." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, packing, and the terrifying realization that he was actually moving. He sold his furniture in Seattle, realizing none of it would fit the scale of his new life. He arrived back in McAllen in a U-Haul, sweat-drenched and exhausted. But for the first time in a decade, he didn't feel the weight of the grind pressing on his chest. The resolution came on a Saturday afternoon, 1 month after he moved in. Elias was in the kitchen, the one Martha said was meant for tortillas, attempting to make his mother's spicy salsa. The windows were open, and the sound of his nephew's laughter drifted over the low iron fence. Sophia walked in through the back door without knocking, carrying a stack of mail she'd picked up for him. She stopped and looked around. The house was no longer a hollow shell of white stucco. There were books on the shelves, a messy stack of work papers on the island, and a dog bed in the corner for the golden retriever Elias had adopted from the local shelter the week before. "So," Sophia said, leaning against the counter, "how does it feel? Now that the first mortgage payment, well, the lack thereof, has settled in?" Elias looked at his sister, then out at the wide, sun-drenched backyard where his dog was currently chasing a butterfly. He thought about the quiet mornings on the patio, the lack of traffic noise, and the way his heart didn't race when he checked his bank account. I thought about the neighbors who had already brought over what Tupperware containers of tamales, and the way he felt anchored to the earth instead of floating above it. "You know," Elias said, handing her a chip with a glob of salsa, "I used to tell people in Seattle that the valley was just a place you leave if you want to be successful. I thought success was a high-rise view and a 6-figure salary that disappeared into rent. And now?" Sophia asked. Elias smiled, a genuine, relaxed expression that reached his eyes. "Now I realize that $355,000 buys a lot of things. It buys granite and tile, sure. It buys a pool and a big garage. It buys McAllen. It buys you your life back. It buys you time to breathe and space to grow. It buys you the ability to be a brother and an uncle again." He looked around the bright, airy room. The house didn't feel too big anymore. It felt like a vessel waiting to be filled with new memories, a structure that was finally a home because it was inhabited by someone who wanted to be there. "It's the best bargain I've ever seen," Elias concluded. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, peaceful shadows across Larkspur Lane, Elias knew he wasn't just a visitor anymore. He was a resident. He had traded a tiny slice of the fast lane for a sprawling piece of the heartland. And as he listened to the cicadas begin their evening chorus, he knew exactly what $355,000 had bought him. It had bought him peace. It had bought him a future. It had bought him home. The story of the house on Larkspur Lane wasn't just about real estate. It was about the price of belonging. In the end, Elias realized that while the market determines the price of a house, only the heart can determine the value of a home. And in McAllen, Texas, he had found that his heart was worth every penny,